Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Iris Tao. President Biden today vowing that there will be no default. This amid ongoing negotiations with the Republican House Speaker over raising the debt ceiling. Let's take a listen.
Speaker McCarthy and I have had several productive conversations, and our staffs continue to meet as we speak, as a matter of fact, and they're making progress. Congressional leaders understand that, and they've all agreed there will be no default.
But Biden went on to say that he and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have very different views on who should bear the burden of additional efforts to get the country's fiscal house in order. Biden spoke at the White House during an event to introduce Charles Q. Brown Jr., his nominee for chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Well, General Brown is a proud, butt-kicking American airman. First and always, he's also been an operational leader in the Joint Force. He knows what it means to be in the thick of battle and how to keep your cool, like when your F-16 was on fire.
If confirmed, General Brown, currently the Air Force Chief of Staff, will replace outgoing General Mark Milley. In a rare display of bipartisanship, President Biden is backing House Republicans' Halt Fentanyl Act. The bill, which passed the House today, permanently designates fentanyl-like substances among the most dangerous drugs. But some lawmakers tell NTD that more needs to be done to counter the fentanyl crisis. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the details from Capitol Hill.
More than 150 people die every day from overdosing on fentanyl. The epidemic is described by the DEA as the deadliest drug threat our nation has ever encountered. And in an attempt to combat this today, the House passed a bill that would list fentanyl as a Schedule I narcotic. And Republicans say that there are more aspects to consider.
It hasn't always been fentanyl, but what has been one of the common denominators in the problem is what's going on at our border and how the drugs get into this country. The whole drug problem is multifaceted, and we need to address it.
You got to deal with it at the source, which is our southern border. That's how it's getting in. And so I would say, even though this bill is important, the most serious bill is our border security package that we passed a couple of weeks ago.
There were many Democrats who joined with Republicans to support this bill, although one of them told me that they would have liked to have seen some changes to it, but he described this issue as too serious to delay action on.
This is not the way I would write the bill. But since I know it's a work in progress and something that's so devastating, Congress needs to take action.
And President Biden does support this GOP-led bill, writing in a statement that the act includes critical components for the administration's plan to combat the supply of illicit fentanyl. The bill passed with 289 yes votes, while 132 Democrats and 1 Republican opposed it. Now, some are concerned about using criminal penalties to combat what they describe as a public health crisis.
Mandatory minimums just don't work. You need to have circumstances differ from case to case.
We know that China plays a role in trafficking this illegal fentanyl. Can you give our audience an understanding of to what level does China play in trafficking this fentanyl, and is there a way you all can hold the regime accountable for this?
Yeah, no, they play a big role. Well, I call it Xi Jinping's gang. To me, it almost seems like a criminal enterprise of what they're utilizing to try to get into the United States because they know of the havoc that it creates.
The bill is now headed over to the Senate, where it could be tweaked before final passage in both chambers, and then off to the White House, where the president is expected to sign it. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
A federal judge has just handed down the longest sentence so far over the January 6th Capitol breach. The founder of Oath Keeper, Stewart Rhodes, today got 18 years in prison. Rhodes was convicted of seditious conspiracy in connection to the Capitol breach. He was not in D.C. on the day, but members of his organization were. A U.S. district judge in D.C. handed down the sentence. She addressed Rhodes directly, saying, quote, "What we absolutely cannot have is a group of citizens prepared to take up arms in order to foment a revolution, and that's what you did." Rhodes maintains that he is a political prisoner. Amid allegations that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas failed to properly disclose luxury trips from a Republican donor, calls are mounting for the Supreme Court to adopt a code of ethics. And that's as Chief Justice John Roberts defended the court's reputation in a new speech. To break it all down, we sat down with Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. And Carrie Severino, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So recently there's been mounting calls for the Supreme Court to adopt a formal code of ethics, especially amid concerns about the justices' financial disclosures. But Chief Justice Roberts defended the court in a speech this week by saying that it could make its own reforms without having Congress use legislation to mandate a code. What's your take on it, and should Congress get involved and do more?
Well, not only is the court perfectly capable of monitoring its own behavior, and that's what it has done consistently, that really is the only institution that can monitor its behavior apart from the very strong remedy of impeachment. That's what our Constitution lays out, that during good behavior, justices would serve, and if there is truly bad behavior, that you can impeach a justice, and it's happened before, and that's Congress's remedy. But what we're looking at here is doesn't even go in the same sentence as impeachment, because not only is it not a high-level crime, it's not criminal behavior at all. It's not even in violation of the ethics and recusal rules. So we have the senators generally cherry-picking particular justices that they disagree with, and then trying to nitpick and find errors that they've made, that they've needed to update their disclosure forms for various things. But in reality, that's something that every justice has had to do over time, and there's absolutely not a whiff of true corruption or problem here. It's really a fishing expedition to try to harass and intimidate certain justices.
And in this speech, Chief Justice Roberts also criticized what he called abhorrent behavior in the legal arena today, including protesters surrounding the homes of justices in the wake of the abortion ruling, he said. So what do you think about the current pressure facing these justices nowadays? And should the American public be concerned about their ability to make independent decisions?
Yeah, we want our judges to be independent. That's why the Constitution gives them life tenure. Our judges ought to be making their decisions not because they are concerned for their safety or the safety of their children, because let's remember, it's not just these justices' homes that have been doxxed, but their places of worship and in some cases where their children attend school. They shouldn't be making their decisions based on fear of safety for their family. That's something we might expect in Cuba and Venezuela and Russia. They should be making their decisions based on their best legal arguments, that by their own legal judgment.
And moving on to the more political aspect here, we see that last week a group of Democratic lawmakers basically reintroduced legislation to expand the Supreme Court, with Congressman Hank Johnson accusing Republicans of, quote, capturing the court against the will of most Americans. Is a 6-3 supermajority something that we should be concerned about?
Well, if that's concerning, then the court, for most of our living memory, would have been very concerning as well, but in the opposite direction. Look, the court goes through phases of being controlled by different parties, and for most of the 20th century, it was very strongly controlled by liberals. That wasn't an argument for let's pack the court. If you disagree with the way the court interprets the law, there is a process for replacing those justices, but we shouldn't try to pack the court, because that, of course, if Democrats do that, add 4 justices as they're proposing now, then obviously Republicans, when they come into power again, and everything is going to, eventually what goes around will come around. The Republicans will do the same thing. We'll keep on, one-upping, having a one-way ratchet that will increase the Supreme Court for purely political ends. We have withstood doing that for over 100 years in this country, and I think that is absolutely a norm we ought to perpetuate so the court doesn't become more politicized.
And finally, before I let you go here, as the Supreme Court is set to issue important rulings on, let's say, affirmative action and student loan forgiveness in the coming weeks, how can we help ensure that the High Court's ability to independently make decisions can be protected going forward?
I think an important thing is to remind those senators that they do their job. Their job is legislating, and then the court's job is reading the laws. We should encourage our president to appoint justices that are going to be faithful to the Constitution and the rule of law, and that aren't going to simply act as rubber stamps for whatever the Democratic Party wants. So I think everyone needs to recognize the significance. And as we go into yet another election season, remember that as we're considering various different potential nominees from either party, what would their approach be on the court? And I think we need to stand up for the independence and freedom of the judiciary.
And Carrie Severino, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.